When someone says, "Make America great again," what image comes to mind? A booming factory? A family with a house, a car, and money in the bank? Because this is the real question almost nobody stops long enough to ask. Was America ever truly great? And if so, when exactly? And for whom? For much of the Western world, the ultimate image of greatness was never a nation, but God. So what does greatness actually mean? Military power? Wealth? Or the ability to walk into a room, slam your fist onto the table, and make everyone fall silent? After spending a long time examining history, power, war, and technology, I came to one realization. Perhaps America was never just a nation. Come with me to the very end as we discover what truly made America great. So let's begin at the beginning, the birth of America. In the 1600s and 1700s, the Atlantic was a graveyard for the ambitious. The British, the French, the Spanish, all pushing westward toward North America. Eventually, the British secured a foothold, 13 colonies clinging to the eastern seaboard. This narrow strip of land would one day become the United States of America. For a time, the arrangement held. The colonies were content to remain shadows of the crown. But then, Britain fell into the trap of empire, costly wars, crippling debt. To pay the price of their global ambitions, they turned to the colonies, squeezing them for every cent. Yet the colonists had no seat in Parliament, no vote, no voice. And so the catalyst was born. Taxation without representation. By 1775, the breaking point was reached. Tension ignited into war. George Washington was called to lead a ragtag revolutionary army. And on July 4th, 1776, Thomas Jefferson's Declaration of Independence was signed. The United States was officially born. But here is the part the history books often whisper, or forget to mention entirely. America did not win that war alone. France sent the gold, the warships, and the soldiers. Spain provided the steel and the funding. The Dutch provided the credit. Without them, the revolution would likely have been nothing more than a failed rebellion, a footnote in British history. So ask yourself, who was truly great in this story? The revolutionaries? The French? The Spanish? The financiers? Or was it simply a matter of the right people in the right place at the right time with exactly the right friends? Perhaps history isn't forged by heroes. Perhaps it is forged by the cold logic of power, competing interests, and historical accidents colliding at the perfect moment. And from that collision, the United States emerged. Now, let's talk about World War II, because this is where the story gets interesting, and perhaps a little uncomfortable. Between 1939 and 1945, the world was a funeral pyre. Europe was incinerated. Cities were reduced to skeletal remains. Factories, railways, entire national economies vaporized. Great Britain was staring at bankruptcy. Germany and Japan were bleeding out. And while the Soviet Union bore the horrific brunt of the land war in Europe, enduring losses that defy imagination, the United States emerged as the world's untouched industrial and financial engine. Not a single brick in New York or Detroit was ever touched. Think about the sheer weight of that reality. While every other industrial power on Earth was fighting a desperate battle for survival against invasion and carpet bombing, America was simply producing. The Ford Motor Company stopped making sedans and started churning out tanks and aircraft at a terrifying velocity. By the time the smoke cleared in 1945, the United States controlled nearly 50% of the entire world's industrial output. 1 out of every 2 cars or 2 light bulbs on the planet was made in the USA. So we have to ask, was that greatness or was it geography? America is shielded by a fortress no military strategist can replicate. 2 vast oceans, the Atlantic on one side, the Pacific on the other. In the 1940s, military technology simply hadn't caught up to the physics of moving an invasion force across thousands of miles of deep water. And its neighbors, Canada and Mexico, posed no threat. America could produce without end because its soil was sacrosanct. Its rivals didn't have that luxury. Their factories were ash. Perhaps the American ascent wasn't just a triumph of spirit. It was the result of being the right nation, in the right place, at the right moment. It was the greatest geographic dividend ever paid to a civilization. Imagine a boxer claiming to be the greatest of all time, but he only enters the ring after his strongest opponents have already fought 10 rounds and sustained broken ribs. Even before the US officially joined the fray, they were profiting from it. Through the Lend-Lease program, America sold weapons, food, and supplies to the Allies. But it wasn't a gift. In exchange, the US extracted gold, hard cash, foreign assets, and long-term leases on strategic military bases. When France fell in 1940 and Britain was at its lowest ebb, Winston Churchill had to personally beg Roosevelt for help. The price? America traded 50 aging destroyers for 99-year rights to key British bases. By the end of the war, Britain owed the US billions. By 1945, the United States held over 50% of the world's gold reserves. Britain, France, Germany, Japan, Russia, they weren't just outmatched in the economic ring, they were eviscerated in their own backyards. Think of it like this. Your neighbor's house is being robbed. Instead of just helping him stop the thieves, you sell him a baseball bat, while quietly buying up the deed to his house at a foreclosure price. In geopolitics, aid is rarely unconditional. Was that greatness? Or was it cold-blooded strategy? But in a world of poverty and instability, no nation can stay wealthy in a vacuum. Sooner or later, the chaos reaches your doorstep. You can't build a house of gold in a violent neighborhood and expect to sleep in peace. On December 7th, 1941, Japan attacked Pearl Harbor. In a single morning, the illusion that America could remain a spectator shattered. The US declared war on Japan. Germany and Italy declared war on the US. The sleeping giant was finally in the ring. By May 1945, the Nazis surrendered. By August, following the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, Japan followed. The war ended, and America was the last man standing, with its pockets full and its infrastructure intact. But the old question remains. Was America truly great? Or was it a nation navigating history through the lens of geography, industry, and strategic self-interest? The United States didn't finish the war alone, and they didn't join it when the world first started to burn. They stepped in only when global conflict, economic gain, and national security finally converged. And just as Nazi Germany showed signs of collapse, the US launched Operation Paperclip, a shadow mission to harvest the brightest minds of the German war machine. Wernher von Braun, the man who built the V-2 rockets that terrorized London, became the father of the American moon landing. America didn't just win through industry. They absorbed the collective knowledge, talent, and technology of a broken Europe and weaponized it on a scale the world had never seen. In the aftermath of the war, the United States didn't just win a military victory. They won the future of global commerce. They didn't just play the game. They rewrote the rulebook. Through the Bretton Woods Agreement, the world's currencies were tethered to the US dollar, and the dollar itself was anchored to gold at exactly $35 an ounce. Since America now held the lion's share of the world's gold, any nation that wanted to trade internationally had to trade in dollars. Europe was a landscape of ruins. Governments could print their own paper money, of course, but paper can't rebuild a factory. What Europe needed were tangible resources: steel, machinery, fuel, food. And America was the only shop open for business. Enter the Marshall Plan. Washington poured billions into the reconstruction of Europe, but this new system came with fine print. open markets, dollar-based trade, and an international order centered squarely on American power. History often remembers this as an act of pure, unadulterated altruism. And make no mistake, there was genuine generosity involved. But beneath the surface lay a cold economic logic. After the war, American factories faced a crisis of their own. They were producing more goods than Americans could possibly buy. If Europe remained impoverished and broken, who would buy American wheat, American cars, or American machines? The Marshall Plan didn't just save Europe, it fueled the American Golden Age. Soon, the world was drowning in American exports. Refrigerators, cars, washing machines, oil. The very concept of consumer culture began to wear an American face. For a moment, the dream was real. A factory worker at General Motors could support a family, own a house in the suburbs, drive a new car, and retire in comfort. Many Americans came to believe this prosperity was born solely from the American spirit. But they were also reaping the rewards of a historical anomaly. Every single one of their industrial rivals had been physically leveled by the war. At the same time, Washington watched with a wary eye as the Soviet Union expanded its shadow across Eastern Europe. They knew that a hungry, desperate Europe was fertile ground for communism. Rebuilding the continent wasn't just a charity project, it was a geopolitical shield, protecting American interests under the guise of protecting European people. The Cold War dragged on for over 40 years. America turned West Germany into a military buffer. Britain and France watched their colonial empires crumble into dust. And the Soviet Union was goaded into an arms race so expensive that its entire economy eventually fractured under the strain. On December 26, 1991, the USSR finally collapsed. So, we return to the question. After 1945, was America truly great? Or was it simply the nation that benefited most from the destruction of the old world order, before meticulously designing a new one that revolved entirely around itself? The moment the dollar abandoned gold. While the nations shattered by World War II were buried in the toil of reconstruction, the United States was reaching a tipping point. By the late 1960s, the first hairline fractures began to spiderweb across the American foundation. Washington was hemorrhaging capital on a scale the world had never seen. The quagmire of the Vietnam War, global military expansion, the cost of maintaining a superpower's influence, and ambitious social programs back home. The printing presses were running hot, outputting more dollars than there was gold in the vaults to back them. And people were starting to notice. Charles de Gaulle became the most vocal critic of this dollar-centric world. He called it America's exorbitant privilege, the power to purchase the world's tangible wealth with nothing more than paper backed by a promise. France stopped taking promises. They started demanding physical gold in exchange for their dollars. The anxiety spread. West Germany began to distance itself from the system. Great Britain requested a massive gold conversion just before the House of Cards gave way. Now we come to a moment that is rarely taught in classrooms, yet defines the very air we breathe today. August 15, 1971. President Richard Nixon stepped in front of the cameras and delivered a brief, measured announcement. The United States was temporarily suspending the convertibility of the dollar into gold. The Bretton Woods system, the entire global financial architecture meticulously crafted after World War II, was dead. In any other era, for any other nation, severing a currency from its anchor would mean instant catastrophe. Hyperinflation, a total loss of faith, economic suicide. But for America, the crash never came. Why? Because by 1971, the world was already too far gone. Global trade was addicted to the dollar. Global oil was priced in the dollar. National debts were denominated in the dollar. Central banks from London to Tokyo held the dollar as their primary reserve. The world was trapped in a room where the only exit was through a door that America owned. And then came the masterstroke.
Through a series of clandestine agreements with Saudi Arabia and the OPEC nations in the 1970s, the United States ensured that global oil would continue to be priced predominantly in US dollars. This created the Petrodollar, a system that manufactured a permanent global hunger for the USD at a moment when it should have been worthless. The result? America could now print the very air the global economy needed to breathe, without the burden of backing it with a single ounce of gold. Perhaps American dominance after 1945 was never purely about the size of its fleet or the reach of its missiles. The dollar became America's greatest export. While every other nation had to labor and produce goods to earn their wealth, America simply produced the medium the world required to trade. As a U.S. Treasury Secretary once infamously told the world, "The dollar is our currency, but it's your problem." So, after everything we've seen, how great is America really? Personally, I still find that question impossible to answer with a simple yes or no. In the theater of geopolitics, your perspective usually dictates what you define as morality. Many Americans today are convinced that globalization destroyed their country. They believe their factories were stolen, their livelihoods snatched away by foreign hands. But let's look at this through a more honest lens. Who actually moved those factories? China didn't invade the Midwest and haul the assembly lines away. Vietnam didn't sneak in at night and dismantle the kilns. American corporations moved them, voluntarily. The economic logic was binary. If labor in Ohio costs $20 an hour and labor overseas costs $1, any company that refuses to move will eventually be cannibalized by the one that does. Apple, Nike, Ford, they weren't being unpatriotic. They were just following the math. But here is the detail most people miss. The factories left, but the control remained. Globalization forced every nation on Earth to plug into a system powered by the US dollar and built on American architecture. Google, Microsoft, Swift. Through globalization, America captured disproportionate value from the global system. Every time someone buys a product designed in California, assembled in China, and sold globally through American financial platforms, the lion's share of that profit flows back to the United States. Wall Street grew fat. Intellectual property, financial systems, brands, patents, and the global dollar infrastructure. It all remained concentrated in American hands. Globalization didn't weaken America. It just widened the chasm within America. The elite grew unimaginably wealthy, while the middle class, the industrial backbone of the country, was left standing in the rain. And globalization is an economic gravity that every industrializing nation eventually has to face. It wasn't a lifestyle choice made by politicians. It was the only escape valve for an economy that had outgrown its own skin. When you build too many factories, train too many engineers, and churn out millions of cars and phones every year, you run into a physical wall, your own population. A South Korean cannot buy 10 Hyundais. A Chinese citizen cannot live in 5 apartments at once. If you don't push that surplus out into the world, the factories go dark, the workers go home, and the economy implodes from the inside out. In physics, water flows from high pressure to low. In macroeconomics, capital flows from low profit to high. Japan, South Korea, China, they are all currently struggling to find new export markets. This proves the core of the issue. The exodus of American factories, the tide of globalization, it wasn't a grand gesture of charity. It was driven by the structural logic of macroeconomics. A nation cannot remain great by standing still. The anger we see today is real. It is justified. But make America great again doesn't quite explain why those factories left, or who really signed the paperwork to let them go. So, in the end, what does greatness actually mean? Is it the ability to slam your fist on a table at an international summit while the world watches in silence? Does fear equate to greatness? Think of a man, massive, imposing, who storms into a room, strikes the table, and demands quiet. That is power, certainly. But true power rarely relies on shouting. True power is born of dependency, the leverage of debt, the weight of obligation. In The Godfather, Don Corleone rarely raises his voice. His influence stems from something much deeper. He offers protection, capital, opportunity, and favors long before he asks for anything in return. Slowly, everyone in his orbit becomes entwined in his system. They don't just follow him because they fear him. They follow him because their own survival is now tethered to his. After 1945, America built exactly that kind of influence. Through NATO, the World Bank, and the IMF, the United States didn't just help rebuild a broken world, it integrated that world into itself. Europe needed American protection. Global commerce needed the American dollar. Financial systems needed American banks. Energy markets relied on American-backed structures. The world became inextricably woven into the fabric of American power. So, when Washington spoke with a heavy hand, the world listened. Not merely because America was strong, but because the very architecture of global existence was built around American reach. A man slamming a table alone is just an outburst of anger. A man slamming a table when hundreds of others are standing behind him, that is power. But perhaps we haven't reached the peak of American greatness yet. I want to pause here. I think we've spent enough time dissecting power and strategy, because there is a version of greatness that has persisted throughout modern history, a version that no person and no nation can truly deny. It doesn't live in a military outpost or a financial spreadsheet. If we go back to the 18th and 19th centuries, we see an America that was obsessed with the practical. Look at Samuel Slater, a man the British called a traitor, who memorized the blueprints of British textile technology to build America's first mill in 1793. Or Andrew Carnegie, who took the Bessemer steel process from England and scaled it to a terrifying degree to forge our modern megacities. The Americans didn't just borrow, they perfected. They took the raw European concept of interchangeable parts and, through minds like Eli Whitney and Henry Ford, created the American system of manufacturing. They turned luxury into a commodity for the masses. It was Edison with the bulb, Bell with the telephone, and the Wright brothers with the sky itself. By 1900, the US was the world's leading industrial power. It was great because it had an uncanny ability to turn technology into an overwhelming advantage, to turn an idea into mass production. This is what people truly mean when they speak of the American spirit. But the most profound version of American greatness was never about bullets or bases. It was found in the laboratory. Look at medicine. Penicillin was discovered by a Scotsman, Alexander Fleming, but it was America that industrialized it during World War II, saving millions of lives. Insulin was discovered by a Canadian, Frederick Banting, but it was American pharmaceutical giants that brought it to the global market, turning a death sentence into a manageable condition. The plague bacterium was identified by the Frenchman Alexandre Yersin, but it was Selman Waxman at Rutgers who gave us streptomycin to finally end the Black Death's reign of terror. From Jonas Salk's polio vaccine to HIV antiretrovirals, from the breakthroughs of cancer immunotherapy to the invention of the MRI and surgical robotics, this is an undeniable greatness. It is a greatness measured by how far it pushed the boundaries of human survival. So, where does that leave the slogan, "Make America Great Again"? When we look at the sweep of history, we find a harsh truth. The version of greatness being invoked today feels like a corrupted file. It stands in direct opposition to the values America actually contributed to the human race. True greatness isn't found in isolationism or shouting at the negotiating table. It's found in the labs, the assembly lines, and the minds that dare to move the needle. The greatest America was never the one that only thought of itself. Make America Great Again is a complex slogan because it demands a return to a version of greatness that was never as simple as nostalgia suggests. The America that truly propelled humanity forward,
The version found in the workshops and the universities wasn't the one shouting the loudest about its own glory. It was the version that looked at the problems of the world instead of staring at its own reflection. And perhaps that's the real question. Not, is America great? But, what kind of greatness do we actually want to build next? The answer to that decides our future. So I'm curious, when you hear that phrase, what version of America appears in your mind? Is it the factory floor, the laboratory, the global hegemon, or something else entirely? Because I think your answer says everything about what you believe America's purpose in this world ought to be. What do you think was the defining moment of American greatness in your eyes?